إن الحمد لله نحمده ونستعينه ونستغفره ونعوذ بالله من شرور أنفسنا وسيئات أعمالنا من يهده الله فلا مضل له ومن يضلل فلا هادي له وأشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له وأشهد أن محمدا عبده ورسوله أما بعد. So the author says in Kashf ush-Shubuhaat, ولكن هذه القصة تفيد أن المسلم بل العالم قد يقع في أنواع من الشرك لا يدري عنها. That this story, the story regarding Banu Israel with Musa alayhi salam asking for or inquiring regarding the deities, and the story of Abu Waqid al-Laythi, where the new Muslims who went out with the Prophet sallallahu alayhi wasallam were asking about the trees and placing their weapons on them for barakah. Those stories, they highlight that a Muslim, even an alim, somebody knowledgeable with some degree of knowledge about the religion, may still fall into different types of shirk without even realizing, without even knowing that they have fallen into a type of shirk. فَتُفِيدُ التَّعَلُّمَ وَالتَّحَرُّزَ. And so therefore this highlights to us the need for at-ta'allum and at-taharruz, that precaution. And these few words in that line there, you may think that these are subsidiary words, they're not the main point to focus on. But the reality is, those words there are from the most important of the words in the general sense, that the need for every Muslim to study and to learn is absolutely vital. Tufidu at-ta'allum. It's like on one occasion, we were when Shaykh al-Fawzan, he came to Medina, and he gave a lecture at the university, in the big university hall. And at the end of the lecture, when there was a Q&A, one question came forward to him, where one of the students asked him, Shaykh, how can I become a Shaykh? The question to him was, Oh Shaykh, how can I become a Shaykh? Obviously the Shaykh doesn't know about the West, you don't need anything, anyone can be a Shaykh. But over there though, when he was asked the question, Shaykh al-Fawzan said to him, a one-word answer. One word. Imagine asking a scholar a question and he gives you literally one word as your reply. Shaykh, how can I become a Shaykh? He said to him, Ta'allam. Study. And that was it. That was it. His one word answer to him, you want to be knowledgeable, you want to have knowledge of your religion, meaning a Shaykh, you want to have knowledge of your religion, you want to have understanding of your religion, you want to be upon comprehension of your religion, then do what? Study. Go and study. Didn't even say go and study, just study. Ta'allam. And so here the Shaykh says, فَتُفِيدُ التَّعَلُّمْ. It highlights to you the importance of studying. We miss the point often when we look at the biographies of the Salaf. Shaykh al-Fawzan always highlights as well, when it comes to the biographies of the Salaf, and in particular the seerah of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, that you don't just read those things because they are interesting stories. Quite often, If people invite me to do a lecture somewhere here and there, they say, can you do the stories of the companions or the stories of some of the Salaf? Because they are interesting, and the people, they'll find it interesting hearing about the stories of the Salaf. And this Salaf, on one occasion, one of them, he went here and this happened and that happened. But the Shaykh al-Fawzan said, look, those stories that you read about the Salaf and about this topic of knowledge and how they used to seek knowledge, don't allow them to just become stories where you say, oh, mashallah, amazing, and then it's forgotten and you carry on with your football or whatever. It is not something which passes in through one ear and exits from the other. When you look at the stories of the Salaf and the level of striving that they put into their seeking of knowledge, Al-Imam al-Bukhari, he says, when he used to go to sleep, at night in his sleep, maybe just stirring or just waking, and some idea, some piece of knowledge or a benefit comes to his mind. That such and such a hadith, there's such and such a benefit in that hadith. When the Prophet said X, Y, and Z, and he's like asleep, he's just in the middle of the night, just waking up, maybe just stirring, and then he remembers, he said, I would wake up, get the pen and write that benefit down. Not just once. He said this would happen, I forgot the figure now. Was it 70, 80? I don't remember the number, but multiple times in the night. More than once, several times, multiple times in the night. He said, I would wake up and remember a benefit and straight away turn on the lantern, get the pen, write it down, then go to sleep again. People these days, there's no chance. You wake up in the middle of the night and you remember a benefit, so what? Tomorrow I'll take care of it. Tomorrow I'll find my notepad and I'll do what I need to do. But they used to do this type of thing. Wake up in the night, multiple times you remember a benefit, let me write it down right now. You look at the other Salaf, how they used to travel from one place to the next in the heat and in the deserts, the distances they used to travel on their donkeys in the deserts. A person needs to think about that. Because as the scholars, they say, if the Salaf came today and saw us, they wouldn't recognize what's going on. They wouldn't recognize what is happening here compared to what they used to do and the striving they were upon. The children they used to send to memorize the Quran at a young age, to the katatib, memorization and learning from a young age. It's extremely important, and a Muslim cannot forget these things. Those two words there, فَتُفِيدُ التَّعَلُّمْ. Those stories, they highlight to you the need to study and to learn, the need to do so. And as the scholars, they say, the more you learn and the more knowledgeable you become of the religion, the more you realize how little you know, even though you are learning more. The more you learn, you're actually becoming more knowledgeable yourself as a person compared to what you knew 6 months ago, or 12 months ago, or 2 years ago. Now you've memorized double the Quran you knew 2 years ago. You've memorized 1,000 more hadith than you knew 2 years ago. You've done another 10 books you've gone through with the scholars compared to 2 years ago. So you're much more knowledgeable now than you were 2 years ago, but now you realize you're even less knowledgeable. Now you realize where you are in comparison to this knowledge. The more you start digging in, the more you realize how much there is, how much of that knowledge there is to learn and to gain, even in simple things. When you think tahara, salah, wudu, prayer, all these kinds of things, there are so many issues to learn in those books of fiqh, the detailed ones. Now we look at al-Mulakhas al-Fiqhi, even Bulugh al-Maram. They're still simple. They're still small. They're not considered detailed books of fiqh. You go into the detailed books of fiqh and the types of discussions they have there on tahara and water, and you find a bowl and you see this and what about that. And so much discussion in the religion, so much discussion about the different topics, and so little we know. And a person has to think about those things. You have to think about the fact that Shaykh bin Baz highlighted when Allah told you in the Quran that He has created you for the purpose of His worship, and that you can only fulfill that purpose through knowledge, then it requires of you to continuously gain that knowledge and to increase and improve yourself in that knowledge. It's like we were saying a while ago in one of the other lectures, that if a person realizes how much knowledge there is out there for him to gain and still learn, then how can he possibly find time for other affairs that are useless and not from this knowledge? How can a person find time for other useless affairs that are not from this knowledge or from this religion, and spend hours and hours on these other affairs, and yet he doesn't know the details of these matters? We were talking the other day, some of us, about some of these issues that have been going on and they won't finish. The issue we were talking the other day, some brothers were mentioning about the moon landing. To this day, 40 years, how long has it been now? Since 69. And to this day, there are people out there spending hours and hours debating. No, they didn't go. Here's the evidence. That and others, they did go. And this is the proof and that's the proof, and satellite images. 40 years have gone by, 50 years, and they're still debating, and where have they got? And what benefit does it give you? You know, when they asked Shaykh Fawzan about the moon, they said the kuffar said they went to the moon. They said to Shaykh Fawzan, the kuffar say they went to the moon. The Shaykh said, let them go. Yani, who cares? What does it matter? Does it affect your religion if they went to the moon or not? He said, let them go if they want to go. Let them go if they're able to go. And that's it, finished. It's not a relevant issue or a topic that you need to spend a week or 2 weeks or hours every night watching all these random videos and articles. What benefit are you going to get out of it? There's a small Islamic discussion on the affair. Is it possible for a human to breach, to go beyond the sky of this earth? Because there are some evidences that indicate it is not possible for anybody to breach the sky of this earth. But those topics, you look at the research papers that the scholars write about it, no bigger than, not even this book, half of this book, 30, 40 pages, the ayat talking about them, explaining them, and you're done. The topic is explained in brief about whether you can go through the sky of this earth, and if that's possible or not according to the evidences, and that's it. Once you've studied that topic up to then, you've understood those and the evidences, and that there are scholars who say, no, the evidences highlight that it's impermissible and impossible for humans to go beyond the sky of this earth. So upon that you would say, no, nobody's been to the moon. Other scholars, though, they say, no, these evidences, you could potentially use them to mean what you're saying they mean, but it's not necessitated. Those ayat do not necessitate that it's impossible for humans to go beyond the sky of this earth. And so then, if that's the case, and there are many scholars who are upon that, there's no issue if the kuffar say they went to the moon or not. And there's no requirement for you to sit there and investigate these affairs. A believer needs to be sharp with his time. And what you're going to study, what you're not going to study, what you're going to research, what you're not going to research. Otherwise you will end up into affairs in detail that you have no need or requirement to go into detail for. And it's not going to benefit you in any way. Neither are you ever going to use that information in any Islamic bahth, in any Islamic topic or research in any way, about whether the kuffar went on the satellites and this and that and everything else in the radiation belt. You're never going to use that anywhere in any Islamic topics. That's just one general example. That a person needs to be careful when it comes to the ilm, ta'allum. Because there is ilm which is ilmun nafi', and there is ilm which is not nafi'. Knowledge that is beneficial, that you need to gain, and knowledge that is not. And it is not needed and it is not required or necessary for you to have. So make a distinction where you put your efforts into, where you put your hours into. This knowledge you are seeking in these hours and hours of your time, is that from al-ilm al-nafi', the beneficial knowledge that will benefit you when you stand on the Day of Judgment? Or is it from the knowledge that in reality isn't improving your religion in any way, and it's not benefiting you in reality in any way, and it's not going to help your accountability on the Day of Judgment? Then that type of knowledge, it can remain in the box of general knowledge. Like one of them, they used to say in Medina, from the people of knowledge, he used to say, I listen to the radio half an hour a day. 30 minutes a day, I listen to the radio and the worldwide news, so that I can keep up with the affairs. Nobody's saying be ignorant and jahil and never know what's going on anywhere. Keep up with what's going on in the news, etc. He said half an hour a day, a 30-minute news broadcast or whatever it was, I listen to that every day, so that I'm up to date with everything and what's happening. I'm up to date. People may come from different countries, say, Sheikh, this is happening, that's happening, what's your opinion, what do we do? He said, I'm up to date with world affairs, and that's it. 30 minutes a day. Not 2 hours, not 3 hours, not 5 hours, watching YouTube videos and all types of things. Half an hour a day to keep up with the affairs, and that's it. Now get down to your work. So here he says, and by the way, just as an incidental point, there were some from the Salaf who were so engrossed in their knowledge that they didn't actually know what was going on with worldly affairs. They mention a story of one of the Salaf, I don't remember the name, one of the Salaf, that when he used to go out to the market, he would go out to the market when need be for his home responsibilities, have to buy some things. He would go to the market, and as we say these days, he would get completely ripped off. He would go and buy a bottle, this one for £5.55. He would go and buy a notebook for £7.20, 20-page notebook. He would get, as we say these days, ripped off. And that's because they say in his biography, he didn't know about these affairs at all. Market, how much, what did they sell the bottles for, what's this, nothing. He knew none of those affairs. He was there absolutely in his chains of narration, inside out, and the religion and fiqh, tafsir, all of that upon knowledge, detailed knowledge. As for how much a bottle of water costs in the market, no idea. Go there, they say, oh yeah, this one's the £10 bottle. Okay, here you go. No idea, they say. Didn't know about these affairs, never mingled in those affairs, never went to the markets, only in necessity, got to pick something up. That he didn't know about those affairs. Of course, nobody's saying that you go to that level, that you would end up, and nobody's going to end up in that level anyway here. We are not of that caliber that we're going to spend so much that we end up in this affair where we know nothing about the worldly matters. But a person strives to balance his time is the point, that you don't engage with the knowledge and the ta'allum in affairs that are not going to benefit you, but rather the ta'allum in affairs that are going to benefit you in your accountability when you stand on that day. So, تفيد التعلم والتحرز ومعرفة أن قول الجاهل. Also from those stories you understand when the jahil says التوحيد فهمناه. When the commoner comes along and he says, look, tawheed, we understand. We understand tawheed. What is there about tawheed? You keep going on about it. We understand tawheed. We don't prostrate to idols. We don't do this. We don't do that. We worship Allah alone. We understand tawheed. أن هذا من أكبر الجهل ومكائد الشيطان. That this is from the greatest of ignorance, that a person comes to you and says, look, I know all tawheed. Don't waste my time on tawheed. I know these affairs. It's easy. This is from the greatest of ignorance of that person. وَمَكَائِدِ الشَّيْطَانِ. And from the plots of the shaitan. From the plots of the shaitan upon him. And this is exactly what is said these days, and the scholars have mentioned it, that there are so-called callers out there from the deviants that promote this. And they say to the people, tawheed, we understand. Don't prostrate to idols. Don't do this, that. We understand tawheed. This is an affair that is simple, and the ummah does not fall into tawheed. 5-minute job. Rather we go to this topic now and that topic and the rulers and politics and whatever it might be. So they say this, and this is in Arabic books from some of the deviated callers, in Arab deviated callers that the scholars are aware of, and they've mentioned them and refuted them. Tawheed is not something 5 minutes that you've done and finished. So this is from the greatest of the plots of the shaitan. هذه الكلمة, in the explanation it says, صدرت من بعض الطلبة لما كثر التدريس في التوحيد. This statement, that Tawheed, we've done it. It was a statement that occurred or emanated from some of the students. When plentiful, a lot of Tawheed was taught, and some of the students began to say, we understand Tawheed. سئموا وأرادوا القراءة في كتب أخرى. The Shaykh says that some of them became bored, or they became agitated, that we're doing all these books of Tawheed. We know it all now. They wanted to do different books now and different topics and go on to other things. So he said, some of the students mistakenly made these kinds of comments. وقيل إنه من المراسلين فنقم عليه المصنف في هذا القول يعني أنك ما فهمته حتى الآن. فقال الشيخ رحمه الله ذلك لينبههم. ففي هذه القصة الرد عليهم فإن هؤلاء أهل العلم وصدر منهم ما صدر. The point being then, those people, generally from the stories, the point overall is a person doesn't fully understand, and it always requires further knowledge and further explanation of these points. If you think about, like we said, a decade the messenger was teaching this tawheed. A decade the messenger was teaching that tawheed, and not the other affairs of fiqh, zakat and hajj weren't even there yet. They weren't even there yet. It was just the affairs of tawheed for a decade. So this is not something simple, and a person should not begin to say, but we've done now 3 books on tawheed, we understand all of these affairs. And the reality is, even the 3 books that you've done, if you ask them questions, they won't get them right. So it's something a focus is needed on. وَتُفِيدُ أَيْضًا, also we benefit from these stories from last week, أن المسلم المجتهد إذا تكلم بكلام كفر وهو لا يدري فنبه على ذلك وتاب من ساعته أنه لا يكفر كما فعل بنو إسرائيل والذين سألوا النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم. He makes another point here, another benefit, that if a Muslim makes ijtihad on an affair, as Banu Israel did there, and they made that inquiry, and those Muslims with the Prophet ﷺ did so and made their inquiry, they made their ijtihad, is this possible or not? If a person does that and ends up saying something which is deemed from the fold of kufr, but he doesn't know, like Banu Israel made that inquiry and they didn't know, those Muslims with the Prophet made that inquiry about the tree and the barakah, they didn't know. If a person does that and makes such a statement and they don't know, and it is clarified to them immediately, they are made aware of the matter immediately, and they repent instantly, they realize their inquiry, their thought that they had about these affairs was incorrect, so they drop it immediately, then that person does not commit kufr. So Banu Israel weren't aware and they made this inquiry and they were asking about those affairs, but they were told and instantly they dropped that affair. So no kufr, they didn't do it, they didn't go ahead. The ones with the Prophet ﷺ, when they were told, instantly dropped it, and that was the end of it. That's not kufr then, they didn't go ahead and proceed and do anything. وَتُفِيدُ أَيْضًا, also you benefit أنه لو لم يكفر فإنه يغلظ عليه الكلام تغليظا شديدا كما فعل رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم. But even if in that instance, like with Banu Israel and with the Muslims, Abu Waqid and Al-Laythi and the others, with the Prophet ﷺ, even if in those circumstances they inquired but they didn't do anything, therefore it wasn't kufr, but nevertheless, because of the severity of the situation and the nature of the inquiry, then you do give, the point being made here, you do give a severe reply, a strict reply to that type of situation, as Banu Israel were given by Musa alayhi salam, and as those new Muslims were given by the Prophet sallallahu alayhi wasallam. Because even though we're saying they didn't do anything, it's not kufr, but the nature of the inquiry is something severe. It's a heavy item. So that needs a proper and strict and severe reply and clarification, as occurred in the story of Musa alayhi salam and the story regarding the Prophet sallallahu alayhi wasallam and those new Muslims. So that is the particular issue there summarized. That's rounded off now. Those two stories cannot be used as evidences in a nutshell because nothing happened in them. There were inquiries and they were rebuked upon them, but they didn't do anything and they didn't proceed and no kufr occurred. So they cannot be used as examples. And in fact, they can be used as examples for the other meaning. That you people don't just inquire, you actually go and do those things. And if they had actually gone and done them, then yes, it's an evidence against you. Because then they would have committed kufr if they had proceeded and done it. You are proceeding and doing it. So upon the stories and upon the principle, then yes, you have committed kufr. And they would have if they did it, but they didn't. Then after that, the 10th section, or doubt. وَلَهُمْ شُبْهَةٌ أُخْرَى يقولون إن النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم أنكر على أسامة قتل من قال لا إله إلا الله وقال أقتلته بعدما قال لا إله إلا الله وكذلك قوله أمرت أن أقاتل الناس حتى يقولوا لا إله إلا الله وأحاديث أخر في الكف عمن قالها ومراد هؤلاء الجهلة أن من قال لا إله إلا الله لا يكفر ولا يقتل ولو فعل ما فعله. So now the next doubt that they use. They say in the hadith regarding the incident when Usama killed in the battle, when he killed that initially the one who was a mushrik, but then he stated the testimony of La ilaha illallah, but Usama killed him. Radiyallahu anhu. And then when he was questioned about it, he said, but I thought he was only saying it to avoid me killing him. That I considered he was only saying it to avoid me killing him now. They say that the messenger rebuked Usama for that action because the one who he killed at the end of the day had now testified to La ilaha illallah, and so Usama was rebuked for killing him. He had testified to La ilaha illallah. How are they using that story as any type of evidence? He tells you here, they are trying to say from that story that this man was initially a mushrik. Right at the last moment, he says La ilaha illallah. And the Prophet ﷺ is telling Usama he should not have killed him. Indicating, as they say, anyone who says La ilaha illallah is therefore untouchable. As long as you say La ilaha illallah, you are untouchable. The Prophet told Osama, you should not have touched him. You should not have killed him. Because he said, La ilaha illallah. So they are trying to use that now in this narrow box. Anybody who says La ilaha illallah, this narration highlights to us, he is untouchable. And they say that they say La ilaha illallah. They claim about themselves, they say, look, we are upon La ilaha illallah. We are also untouchable. You cannot apply all of this upon us and say kufr and this and kufr and that. Osama was told, the man said La ilaha illallah, you should have left him. So leave us, we say La ilaha illallah. Mostly, like we said, these doubts towards the end of the book, they've been answered from the beginning. These are just specific stories and events they use. But the answer to that has been given already. In the main section at the beginning, the bulk of it has answered this. The Shahada, La ilaha illallah, has various components to it. There is the statement that you say, La ilaha illallah. And we know that is obligatory upon a Muslim. To enter into Islam, you must say La ilaha illallah. And there are exceptions. For example, a person who can't speak. So the utterance, the saying of La ilaha illallah is a requirement. But there are two other components that go with it. One of them being that you understand it and believe in it. Understand it and believe in it. The munafiqun, they understood it, but they didn't believe in it in their hearts. So even if they were saying it upon their tongues, it means nothing. So saying it upon your tongue, but also understanding and believing in it with certainty in your heart. And the third component, acting upon it. The requirement is to act upon it. Nobody can claim to say the Shahada, but then they say they're going to carry on going and doing tawaf around the grave, and they're going to insist on prostrating and slaughtering and vowing and continue upon all of those actions. But then they say, no, but I say La ilaha illallah. The Shahada requires the statement of it, the belief and understanding of it, and the action upon it. That's one general point. That these people making this type of doubt, you say, okay. But those three components are all required. It's not just to say it, but not believe in it or act upon it. The munafiqun would claim that they were upon the Shahada, yet they didn't accept it in their hearts. They were even acting, going to the mosque and praying and doing things, but in their hearts they were not accepting of it. So there is an acceptance and a belief, and there is an action along with the statement. That's one general point clear to be made. And the other points, we've already gone through them in detail. If a person says La ilaha illallah, yet in maybe even just one component of the religion that is severe enough that if you make an opposition in it, it can be deemed as kufr still. So the general answer has already been given, but this final third of the book is going to give specific evidences that they try and use. So that one there is one example of that story of Osama killing that individual, and it cannot be used in that way. The other example is the hadith where the Prophet said that I have been commanded to fight the people until they say La ilaha illallah. So again they try to use the same narration in the same way, that the Prophet said he was commanded to fight against the people until they make the statement La ilaha illallah. Then he can no longer, as the narration carries on and says, their blood and their wealth is protected now. They say, look, we say La ilaha illallah, we are in the narration, we are protected, our blood and our wealth and our honor. You cannot declare all these rulings upon us. The messenger said, until they say La ilaha illallah. The response is the same as before. Yes, you say maybe La ilaha illallah, maybe you pray, maybe you do adhan, maybe you do Jum'ah, like all those people and the examples that were given before. But because of this act of shirk that you are doing, then even if you're saying La ilaha illallah and claiming it, this action of shirk is nullifying your religion and exiting you from the fold of Islam. So the ignorant ones, they say no, as long as you say La ilaha illallah, that person cannot then commit kufr, that person cannot then be killed, no matter what he does. Is it 9 o'clock? So then it says, فَيُقَالُ لِهَؤُلَاءِ الْمُشْرِكِينَ الْجُهَّالِ. The general reply we already know from before, but then he says, you say to these ignorant mushrikeen, مَعْلُومٌ أَنَّ رَسُولَ اللَّهِ صَلَّى اللَّهُ عَلَيْهِ وَسَلَّمْ قَاتَلَ الْيَهُودَ وَسَبَاهُمْ وَهُمْ يَقُولُونَ لَا إِلَهَ إِلَّا اللَّهِ. That it is known that the Prophet ﷺ fought against the Jews and took them as prisoners, and they were claiming La ilaha illallah. The Jews were claiming that there is only Allah to be worshipped. They were claiming tawheed, inverted commas. وَأَنَّ أصحاب رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم قاتلوا بني حنيفة وهم يشهدون أن لا إله إلا الله وأن محمد رسول الله ويصلون ويدعون الإسلام. You remember already the example before of Banu Hanifa, the ones who used to claim the Shahada, and there were examples of them praying and establishing the prayers. They were doing those things, the adhan, the Jum'ah, the other example of the Bani Ubayd al-Qaddah. Those people, they were doing the prayers, they were doing worship, they were proclaiming La ilaha illallah. And yet, that didn't prevent the companions of the Messenger fighting against Banu Hanifa. And it didn't prevent كذلك الذين حرقهم علي بن أبي طالب رضي الله عنه بالنار. The ones who exaggerated regarding Ali, they were claiming La ilaha illallah, praying, establishing the 5, and doing the Jum'ah and the Adhan, etc. That didn't stop Ali ibn Abi Talib or any of the other companions by consensus agreeing that they had committed kufr after they raised Ali ibn Abi Talib to levels of uluhiyyah. So these types of examples they are trying to give you, it goes back to everything that's been mentioned before, that just saying La ilaha illallah, that isn't your correct understanding. There's a lot more to it. The munafiqun were claiming Islam and the Shahada and the testimony, and yet they were obviously munafiqun. There are many others who claim it, and yet they are upon shirk and kufr, tawaf around the graves and slaughtering to them and all types of things. وَهَؤُلَاءِ الْجَهَلَ مُقِرُّونَ أَنَّ مَنْ أَنْكَرَ الْبَعْثَ كَفَرَ وَقُتِلَ وَلَوْ قَالَ لَا إِلَهَ إِلَّا اللَّهِ وَأَنَّ مَنْ جَحَدَ. Now, these ignorant ones, if you bring those other points to them, you say to them, if somebody rejects the resurrection, then are they upon kufr? The ignorant ones, even they'll acknowledge, okay, well, if you reject the day of judgment and you reject resurrection, then that's kufr. They accept and they acknowledge that if a person was to reject resurrection and the day of judgment, even if they are saying La ilaha illallah, if they reject those kinds of things, then it's obviously kufr. So there's a clear, easy explanation to them. You understand that. You understand that if a person says La ilaha illallah, but they outright reject there is a day of judgment and a resurrection and Yawm al-Qiyamah, then what's that? They'll say, okay, well that's kufr then. So now you've made the point to them again. They are saying La ilaha illallah, but you're saying that they are upon kufr because of another component where they've made an error in. So La ilaha illallah doesn't give you absolute, you're infallible now, there's nothing untouchable. You're committing errors in other affairs and other components of the religion which are kufr and shirk. Then they are going to negate and nullify your religion. وَأَنَّ مَنْ جَحَدَ شَيْئًا مِنْ أَرْكَانِ الْإِسْلَامِ كَفَرَ وَقُتِلَ وَلَوْ قَالَهَا. And if somebody, again you say to these ignorant ones, if someone was to reject one of the pillars of Islam, they say La ilaha illallah, but they reject the prayer, or they reject fasting, or they reject zakat or hajj. Reject it. Not that they're lazy and they don't do it. They reject it. There's no such thing as hajj in Islam. We're not going to do it. It's rejection from them of the pillars of Islam. Even if they say La ilaha illallah, then this is kufr. فكيف لا تنفعه إذا جحد شيئا من الفروع وتنفعه إذا جحد التوحيد الذي هو أصل دين الرسل ورأسه. So then you say to him, how can it be that if a person rejects one of those pillars of Islam, zakat or fasting, that you're saying, okay, well that's kufr then. But when a person rejects aspects of tawheed itself, then you're not willing to accept that this is kufr. A person rejects actual aspects of tawheed by prostrating to the graves and slaughtering to the dead and seeking intercession from the deceased and doing all these things that are actual issues in tawheed. They are oppositions in tawheed. There you won't accept it's kufr, but when they reject some other affair like fasting or zakat, then you say, okay, that's kufr. How can that be? Again, you're explaining to him your understanding and your mentality and your logic isn't working in your discussion or in your position. So how can it be, he says, that a person who rejects tawheed, then he is still okay, which is the basis of the religion of the messengers, and at the head of it, a person rejects components of tawheed, but he's okay. But a person who rejects other affairs, he's not okay. Then you have clarified to him once again, your logic is incorrect, your understanding is incorrect. وَلَكِنَّ أَعْدَاءَ اللَّهِ مَا فَهِمُوا مَعْنَى الْأَحَادِيثِ. But the enemies of Allah in reality have not understood the meanings of the narrations. And that's where we'll have to stop today. The meanings of the narrations, the Shaykh is going to break down with a bit more detail the narration of Usama and what happened and what the meaning behind that is, and what the Prophet meant by saying, well, if he said La ilaha illallah, you shouldn't have killed him. Then we'll go into the explanation of that from next time, insha'Allah ta'ala. Anything else to add, or any question or anything?
One of the nullifiers of Islam that's mentioned is not seeking knowledge or acting on it. But, does that mean that if you don't seek knowledge, it's kufr?
Not seeking knowledge and acting upon it being declared as a nullifier of Islam, then it's going to refer to, and this is why when you study all of the books, we were saying now that people, they study a few books, we've done it now, it's all done, we understand it. All of the issues and the topics, they come together. So in the 3 fundamental principles, there's a section that talks about knowledge at the beginning of the book, that is upon you to gain knowledge, etc. Which knowledge is wajib upon every Muslim to gain? Don't give me exact examples of worships. Give me a definition. The knowledge that you require to worship Allah is a necessity upon every Muslim. Wajib. So it is wajib upon every Muslim to learn how to make wudu. Because if you don't, you can't pray. It becomes wajib upon you to learn that. It's wajib upon every Muslim to learn how to actually pray, because if you don't, you can't pray. So there is a minimum level of knowledge, they call it. The minimum line. This is all knowledge. There's a minimum line. Under that line, every Muslim has to gain that knowledge. How to make wudu is under the line. How to pray under the line. Basics of tawheed under that line. Every Muslim has to know those things. If you don't, so you can't make wudu, you can't pray, you don't understand any of the basics of tawheed, you're going to the graves, you're doing these things, then you're in reality not understanding the shahada or implementing it. And therefore, the issue comes in, are those people Muslim then? A person who doesn't understand anything of Islam, none of the basics, none of the minimum quantity, no tawheed, no nothing. It's like people in some parts of the world, all they have left from their ancestors is that they know about, we've heard about this in some parts of the world now, where in the olden days, centuries ago, there were Muslim tribes in those areas in certain parts of the world. Then over the centuries until we get to 2021 now, it diluted and the people went and they mixed in with the other nations and more people came and took over those countries and everything. That now there are people, we've been told, their ancestors from centuries ago were Muslims, but now those people don't know anything about Islam other than the two Eid prayers. I heard once there are people in some countries, Muslims by name, their names are still Muslim maybe from the generations, but they know nothing apart from the two Eid prayers. They know after Ramadan there's an Eid prayer you have to do, you get together, and their ancestors, they used to get together. So knowledge has completely disappeared. Completely disappeared, and nothing is known or understood. So this is along the lines of the topic when talking about knowledge and kufr if you don't know knowledge, meaning that bottom level of tawheed. If you don't know what the shahada is and what it means and what tawheed is, and you don't know how to pray, you don't even pray, then all of those types of issues are now bordering on the boundaries of kufr and shirk, and Islam and tawheed and the opposites of it. We'll have to round off there. We'll continue next time, inshallah ta'ala. وصلى الله على نبينا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه وسلم.